Hey everybody, this is TJR. Happy Halloween. Hanging out here with Superfan.
Hey.
And of course we got the little green guy here. And tonight we both watched the original 1931 Frankenstein for the very first time.
Well, yeah, in its entirety. I've seen bits and pieces, of course. I don't think there's too many people that haven't.
I agree with you. It feels like I've always kind of known the film because I've seen so many clips from this film throughout my lifetime. Sometimes as part of, movie retrospective documentaries, that sort of thing. I saw the movie Gods and Monsters about the director who made the first two Frankenstein films, which is a great film starring Brendan Fraser and Gandalf the Wizard.
You mean Ian McKellen?
Exactly. And I've seen Young Frankenstein. It's unfortunate that I've seen the parody before the actual film, but I feel like I've always known the story because I've seen it adapted in so many ways.
Yeah.
Now, we should give a full disclosure. I'm going to guess maybe 15 to 20 years ago, you and I tried to watch this film. Very early on, I thought it was boring, and we just turned it off. And I don't know who it was that decided that, but I agreed. If it was you, I agreed with you on it.
It more than likely would have been you because if I start a movie, I'm going to finish it.
Okay.
I don't often give up.
I will sometimes. And I'll have to admit, at that point, I'm guessing this was like 20 years ago.
More than that.
I had a real hard time with older movies back then. I don't anymore. In fact, I watch a lot of really old movies now, and I enjoy them a great deal. But I had a hard time, I think, dealing with maybe the way they made them back then. But I think one thing that bothered me about the film is there was no background music. There was an opening theme, but no score. And I didn't understand that back then, a film having a score was not a thing yet.
Yeah.
That didn't come till, a couple years later.
Yeah, it was a different kind of filmmaking back then.
Very different, yeah, very different. The only music would be if the music was part of the story itself. Like, you're at a wedding, so there's wedding music. That was the only time you had music.
Yeah.
And, so watched it all the way through. And I should mention, we watched this on the Criterion channel. We recently started subscribing to it and have watched a lot of movies that I would not have watched otherwise. And like I said, most of them really old films. And I have to admit, this time I was not bored. I enjoyed this film a lot.
Not.
Yeah, I was not bored at all. I enjoyed this film a lot. I'm going to start with the positives as far as what I think. The first thing I really liked about this film is the look of it. The lighting, the staging. And I can tell that there's a lot of outdoor scenes where they're on a set. And it looks really moody and atmospheric, and you've got a painted backdrop. And I can tell all this, but I love the way it looks. Wonderfully atmospheric, and the use of black and white, the various usage of dark to gray tones. Because there's not a whole lot of light in this film. There's a few daytime scenes, but there's a lot of just dark to gray. Yeah. And the use of that, the way that's done is beautiful to look at. And it brings up a subject about unreality. I loved the unreality of this film and how it looked. It looks very painterly. We do that now with CGI, but we make it look more photorealistic.
Yeah.
But I love the way this looks. And that's a subject I should talk about at some point. I don't know why we think films have to look photographically real. I don't know why we just can't look at them like art, like we would a painting. And it doesn't have to look real. It just has to look really good. Anyways, though, that's another subject for another day.
I agree with it, though.
That's what I liked about it. Now, it's funny. I can remember my brothers and sisters would watch old movies on TV and they'd make fun as they watched them. And that's not something I wanted to do during this film, but I was cracking jokes during it.
Yeah, sometimes it has to happen.
Yeah, I there were just moments where it was just like it kind of baffled me how not smart, I don't want to say stupid, but how just not smart a lot of these characters were acting. Right at the very beginning, we've got a funeral burial service, and and he's Henry Frankenstein. He's Victor in the book. And by the way, I should mention, I know the original story. I actually know the story that's in the book. Of course, it's quite different. But Henry Frankenstein and his assistant Fritz, who I always assumed was called Igor.
No, I actually looked that up because I thought it was a little odd too, and it says that Igor is a stock character.
Uh-huh.
There was no Igor in the original book.
Oh yeah, I know that. But I always thought the character in this original film, the kind of hunched over, assistant to Dr. Frankenstein, that his name would be Igor, but he was instead called Fritz.
Yeah.
Where did Igor come from? Did Igor come from some of the later Frankenstein films, maybe? I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is the first one. I've never seen any of the others. So, yeah, I'm going to guess that's what it is.
But Fritz did die, so that left room for an Igor.
That's true. Fritz did get killed. He was the monster's first victim. So, and that's another thing. I remember my mom used to tell me the story about how when she was a little girl, this film came out 1931, and she would have been too young to see it when it came out, but she saw it on re-release some years later when she was a little girl. And her parents didn't want to let her go, but she went anyways without them knowing. She defied her parents. She went with her friends, and she said the film terrified her and that she was afraid to go to sleep for I guess a week or something like that. She would try to close her eyes and go to sleep and she'd see the monster. And she said it terrified her. And I have to admit, you have to remember, 1931, the makeup done on Boris Karloff, seeing it now on this film, and also fully restored picture, unlike the really rough clips I've probably seen in the past, the makeup looks absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
It definitely does hold up.
I could believe this was a real creature when I watched this. And part of that is just how well restored this film has been. I'm sure that whatever I watched earlier probably looked really bad. Probably not. And probably what we saw 20 years ago probably also looked nowhere near as good as this, I'm going to guess.
I kind of vaguely remember that, and I think it was the quality of the picture.
It might have been, and also the quality, who knows, maybe also one of the things that turned me off back then was the poor quality of the sound.
Yeah.
Probably. The sound was probably very poor quality by that time. But here, everything is restored. The picture is crisp and sharp. The sound is very sharp. And so it makes a huge difference in how you see it. But also, time, for me at least, makes a big difference because I understand and appreciate older films a whole lot more now than I probably did back then. But with that said, I still found myself cracking jokes. And I got sidetracked here, but when we open up the film, we're there at a funeral, a burial, and Dr. Frankenstein and his assistant are secretly watching all of this.
Peeking over the fence?
Yes, peeking over a fence, not looking suspicious at all. And they let the guy working at the
gravedigger.
The gravedigger, yeah, basically let him, finish covering the grave and everything, wait till he's all done, and then they go to dig it up. He barely turns the corner. He barely walks off frame when they start digging it up. I kept thinking, well, isn't the gravedigger going to turn around and wonder where's all this noise? But secondly, I thought, Dr. Frankenstein, I mean, I can excuse Fritz for not being smart, but Dr. Frankenstein, it's why didn't you just bribe the guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hey, here's a little green. Here's a few greenbacks. Go get the wife something nice.
Yeah, here's a nickel, go away.
Yeah, no one will be the wiser. I don't know why he didn't do that. So instead, they have to dig the whole thing up and pull out the body. But still, with that said, those scenes looked amazing. They were very atmospheric.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, there were moments like that throughout the film where I just thought, you know, why aren't we being smarter? And there was also one moment early on where we meet his fiancée Elizabeth, and they have a mutual friend whose name is Victor, but he's not a Frankenstein. And we later find out he's the best man. He's supposed to be the best man at their wedding. But there's a scene early on in the film with him and Henry Frankenstein's fiancée Elizabeth. She wants his help. She's very worried about how Henry's doing. He seems to be obsessed with his work. And he says, I would go to the ends of the earth for you. And she says, well, I hope not. I'm very fond of you. And then he says, oh, if only that were true. Or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm watching this and thinking, well, that's really forward and kind of creepy. Especially when you find out later he's supposed to be the best man at their wedding.
Yeah.
And they bring up this whole subplot of him obviously in love with her, and then it never gets brought up again. It just kind of like...
Well, no, Victor Frankenstein.
Henry Frankenstein.
Henry Frankenstein.
Yeah.
When he left, did say, take care of her if I don't come back.
Yeah, and he's like, oh boy. But yeah, it just seems kind of weird that you bring up this like unrequited love interest thing, and then you don't ever come back to it at all. Period. I mean, I'm assuming Henry Frankenstein, when he said that, didn't know that Victor was feeling this way. But then he just tells her when they're alone. It's just kind of weird and creepy.
I agree.
Yeah, and there's that. I noticed all the characters have German names, but none of them have German accents.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it does take place in Germany, but...
Yeah, but that's just Hollywood back then, I guess. Not as much...
We're Americans, this is Hollywood.
Doggone it.
We ain't gonna do no Fritzy accent.
Yeah. Anyways, though. So, I kind of feel also that there's Dr. Frankenstein, and then there's also the other scientist whom I haven't looked this up.
His teacher, yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Waldman. The actor's name is Edward von Sloan. I haven't looked this up, and maybe I should, but I'm pretty sure he's the same actor that played Van Helsing in the original Dracula, which came out the same year, just prior to this one, several months prior.
Yeah, I'm guessing that it's the same actor.
He sure sounded like him. I could be wrong. But the thing is, they both kind of got what they deserved in this film, because they let Fritz torment Frankenstein. They just let him do it. And nobody thinks, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. We've got this physically hugely strong creature here, and we'll just let this guy torture him and torment him and that sort of thing with fire and just enrage him. And so, yeah, of course he kills Fritz. And then later, when he wakes up on the operating table, just as Dr. Waldman is about to dissect him, he wakes up and, of course, strangles him.
Yes.
And it's no wonder.
And it is the same actor.
It is the same actor. Thanks for looking that up.
And as an aside,
Yeah.
Dwight Fry, who played Fritz,
Yeah.
also played Renfield in Dracula.
I thought there was something familiar there, but I thought, no, it couldn't be. Wow, okay. Yeah, because Dracula came out in around February of that year, and then Frankenstein came out in November of the same year. So several months apart. But back then, of course, it was not uncommon to have actors scuttle from one film to another like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes shooting more than one film at the same time. The studios were just real machines back then. I know that when Fay Wray was shooting King Kong, she was shooting another movie on the RKO lot around the same time, and they even used some of the same sets as well. Now, this brings up another thing about the film that kind of surprised me, is the sort of, just kind of ending. the kind of unclimactic ending. Because we've got this big climax where the monster gets burned to death
In the windmill.
in the windmill. When they were burning the windmill, I kind of thought to myself, gee, don't they need this thing for anything? But hey, it looks really cool. It looks really dramatic. And like I said, it looks great. And of course, during this time, there is a fight. There is a confrontation between Henry Frankenstein and his creation in that windmill. And the monster throws Dr. Frankenstein from the top of that windmill. He falls on one of the windmill blades and then falls to the ground from there. Spoiler, yeah, at the end of the film. That's right. That's the part I was trying to get at. At the end of the film, the Henry Frankenstein is in bed, and he's there at his father's house, who is the Baron Frankenstein. And by the way, his character, I'm guessing he was supposed to be comic relief. I did find him kind of annoying, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was kind of annoying.
But different humor.
I guess different kind of humor. I still like the film in spite of all this stuff that I'm bringing up here. But at the ending, we're at the Baron's home where Henry Frankenstein is in bed, recovering, and the wait staff, wants to bring him a glass of wine. And the Baron, who is his father, says he doesn't need this and he drinks it instead and makes some kind of joke about the family.
Yeah.
And we don't have any epilogue. We've got the big climax with the windmill and the fire and the monster apparently being burned to death. But we don't have any epilogue with Henry Frankenstein or Elizabeth.
No, it's basically here's to the future of the family. He drank to a new baby. So that implies that they're married.
Well, he's bedridden, so they never got married. The wedding was interrupted. That was part of what happened. They were the monster interrupts the wedding. We should have mentioned that. Well, he terrorizes the town and he interrupts the wedding. But they just end it with the Baron toasting the family and making a joke. And we don't get any epilogue between Elizabeth and Henry. And
it's just kind of boom, we're done.
Yeah, that's it. Just boom, we're done. Yeah. It was a very kind of like jarring ending for that reason. Very unsatisfying in that way.
Yeah. But once again, this was made almost 100 years ago now.
Yeah, I know. Filmmaking was different. And I'll tell you something. By comparison with Dracula, I didn't find myself cracking jokes when I watched the original Dracula. For the most part, I was in the story, in the world, enjoying it. And I should bring this up because I watched both the English and Spanish version of Dracula that were made by Universal Pictures in 1931. And I did a comparison video on those. It's a favorite video of mine that I made. I don't think it ever got the love it deserves, so if you can, I'll leave a link. Please give that one a watch for the Halloween season. But the point I wanted to get at was I didn't find myself cracking jokes during that film. I was just enjoying it.
Yeah, this one...
Characters just kind of do things that kind of are dumb and don't make sense.
Or, not that are dumb necessarily, not all of them, but some things definitely don't make sense. Like, the father leaves his child playing by the lake and then says she was murdered. Well, how do you know she was murdered?
Yeah, how did he know? Because she could have just fallen in the lake. And I want to talk about that scene between the monster and the little girl. And I have to add, this is one of those scenes that I had seen in the past, that I'd seen played out of context with the film. But I never got the impression that the monster meant any harm to that little girl.
No, he absolutely did not.
It was his first pleasant interaction with another human being, and he enjoyed the little game that he was playing with her, with throwing the flowers in the water.
And to him, that was the natural next step.
When he picked her up and threw her in, he thought he was playing. He didn't think he was doing anything harmful. He didn't know any better.
He was throwing a flower into the lake.
Yeah. And...
that is the straight-up metaphor.
Yeah. And I never felt like he was really in any way, intentionally malicious to her or violent. Because this film has this whole subplot at the beginning that started up where Dr. Waldman is saying to his medical students, notice the difference between the brain of a normal person, don't know what qualifies as normal, and the brain of this criminal, the criminal mind. And notice the difference. And he's trying to say that there's an actual difference in the minds. And of course, the mind of the criminal, the mind of the murderer is what ends up in Frankenstein's body. But I never thought this creature was ever intentionally malicious, just tormented to where that's all it knew.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't think the film quite played up the sadness and pathos of that like it could have. It's an awfully short film, and it felt to me like it could have used a little more time. But with all that said, I still found the film entertaining. I still enjoyed it. But its scenes of, I'll say, suspense, of terror, action, horror, whatever you want to call it, are paced really well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good things in this film, and it's certainly worth watching for historical reasons. I do want to watch The Bride of Frankenstein, which is the sequel. It was made by the same director, and I've heard it's actually a better film. So this is a reaction to Frankenstein, and I want to watch Bride of Frankenstein before the weekend's over. And
we can do that.
Yeah, and more than likely we'll react to that too. Anyways, thank you so much. Let us know what you thought if you've ever seen this film. Let me know what you think of what I've said or what Superfan said. Do you agree? Do you disagree? It's okay to disagree. But just let us know. Leave a comment. As always, if you like these videos, be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. And a big thank you to the patron supporters. Patron supporters receive exclusive weekly videos not available here on the channel. And everybody, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.